Alright, so right now Lena is just slicing the apples. What kind of apples are you using for the pie?
These are Cortland apples.
And is there a reason why you use the Cortlands?
They just produce the texture and the flavor that I like. You can also use Macintosh, and there may be some other ones, but they tend to be nice and crisp once you bake them in a pie.
And then like I said, she's just slicing them up. And that way we can add them to the pie dough. And it's about 8 apples that we use.
The recipe calls for 6. I really like to mound my pies. Almost lost it. And that way there's a good hearty amount of apples in the slice of pie, because they do cook down quite a bit once you bake them.
Alright, so here Alina is going to roll out the pie dough for the apple pie. And you put the flour down so that way the pie dough doesn't stick to the table. Is it okay if it cracks on the edges like that?
Yeah, you just want to make sure it doesn't crack too far. I mean, the edges you'll probably end up trimming off anyways, but you can try to stick them back together, but it's kind of a fruitless effort because it's going to crack anyways. Now this is a homemade pie dough that I made a couple of days ago. It has flour, shortening, butter, and salt, and all that just gets mixed really well together with a pastry blender, and then you just add ice water to bring it together. And then I refrigerate it, at least for a couple of hours. Overnight is better before you work with it, just to kind of allow everything to settle and sit together.
And I noticed you let the dough sit on the counter for a little while too before you worked with it, right?
Right, because you can't roll out cold pie dough. It's just not gonna work for you. So now I periodically flip this in between, that way it all doesn't get stuck to the table once I have it all nice and rolled out. Yeah, I'm hoping that my mom is... Now when you're rolling out pie dough, you obviously want it to be big enough that it will cover your pie pan, but you don't want it to be too thin. Usually like 1/4 inch in thickness is a good thickness. I want to flip this one more time.
That does not look like fun to flip it.
Sometimes I'll use a cookie sheet to cheat if it's not coming up for me. whenever you use homemade pie dough, it's never perfect.
It's all about the taste, not the look. That's what I always tell her.
All right, I think that's probably big enough. To check to see if your pie dough is big enough when you roll it out, you can just take your pie plate and kind of just throw it on there, and this should be big enough. So I'm going to throw a little bit more flour on here and make sure that my rolling pin is floured. And the trick is to get this up and over the rolling pin to help you put it onto the pie plate. I hope this doesn't fall apart. Not bad. Not perfect, but I will take it. And I like to leave a long edge on here. This side is too long and that side is too short, but again, it's homemade. It ain't perfect. Because what I'll do is I'll trim this after I get it filled with my apples, and then I'll make a fluted edge. Alright, so now I'm going to add a little bit of sugar and cinnamon to this. I don't remember how much the recipe calls for. I tend to just eyeball it, and I'll mix everything together and let it sit for a few minutes, and then I'll taste test it to see if it's enough or if I think I need more. Alright, that looks mixed enough. So now I'm going to let it sit for about 15 minutes and we'll see how it tastes.
Dog treats.
I think this pie dish is a little smaller than the other one.
Seems like it, yeah. It's a very big mounding, which is good because I like more apples in the pie. So we have the 2 apple pies with a crumble top. And Alina will go over that in a second. But just want to show you these beautiful pies. We put foil down the bottom because as they bake, sometimes the apples will ooze over because we overload the pies a little bit. So you want to make sure you put that down there or else you get a drippage mess. And if it's not cleaned up, it stinks up once you turn the oven on for the next time. So I'm going to be taking these out of the oven real quick and we'll take a look at them.
So I just pulled my pies out of the oven. I decided to put a crumb topping on them because that's what we prefer. The crumb topping has flour and oatmeal, brown sugar, cinnamon, and a little bit of salt in it, and butter. And you mix all that up with a pastry blender and just put it on the top. These went into the oven at 425 and baked for 30 minutes, and then I turned the oven temperature down to 350, and they cooked for probably another hour. I always slip a sheet of foil underneath the pies in the oven because once they start to get done and the juices start to spew out, I don't like cleaning up the oven. But I did end up turning down the oven down to 325 as these got closer to being done because I could see that they were starting to get a little bit brown on the top. But they smell wonderful, and I can't wait to cut into one of them later tonight.